Okay, before we get started on the lesson today, I wanted to review yesterday's assignment. This is actually warm-up 2, 3, and it actually goes with lesson 2, 2. So I wanted you to solve this problem, and I want you to make sure you know what your steps are. So step by step, the first thing we would do would be to distribute. That means multiply everything on the outside by everything on the inside. So it's 3 times x, which is 3x, or rather 2x, plus 2 times 3, which is 6, plus 2x minus 7 equals, and then again I have to distribute this. 3 times x is 3x, and then 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. I want you to pay close attention to this next step, because we need to add our like terms here. Add our like terms. When we add our like terms, that's 2x plus 2x, which is 4x. And then we add these two together. These are called our constants. So 6 plus negative 7 is negative 1 equals 3x minus 6. This next step is the one I want to talk about the most, because this is the one we learned yesterday. And that is collecting our variables. So collecting our variables means that we have a variable on one side of the equal sign and that same variable on the other side of the equal sign. So in order to collect our variables, remember that the rule is we need to add the opposite of the lowest one to the other side. So if you look, this coefficient is 3, this coefficient is 4, so we need to add the opposite of 3 because that's our smallest, which is negative 3x. So negative 3x to this side, then these will cancel, and I get x minus 1 equals negative 6. Our next step is to add opposite. And that equals x equals negative 5. I want you to pay attention real quick. What is the difference between adding our like terms, which is what we did right here, and collecting our variables, which is what we did in step 3? Adding our like terms is when the variables are on the same side. Collecting our variables is when they are on opposite sides. So therefore, we take the opposite right here, add the opposite. So given that, step 5 would be in the case that we would have a number in front of the x. So if we had a number in front of the x, like a 4, we would divide by 4. So bottom line is, if there were another step, it would be add opposite, and then it would be divide, which we don't in this case. So for your notes for today, notes for 2-3, the main idea is solving for a variable. How do we isolate a given variable if there's more than one variable in the problem? This is called a literal equation. A literal equation is when you're dealing with mostly variables in the problem. You may have some numbers, like this right here, but it's mostly variables. And you're solving for a specific variable. In this case, an N, an R, an R, and a W here. So let's take a look at it. If you were to be asked the question, what does it mean to solve for an X? Well, solving for an X means to isolate the variable. Okay? And if we were isolating a variable, then we would use the inverse operations for it in order to do that. If I had 3x plus 2 equals 6, the inverse of positive 2 is negative 2. Then I would have 3x equals 4. These would cancel out. Then I would divide by 3. The inverse of multiplication is division. So if you take a look at some of our examples, that's exactly what we're going to do. If we are solving for r, getting r by itself right here, I'm going to ask the question, what kind of problem do we have? Well, it's r times t equals d. It's a multiplication problem. The inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by t. If I divide by t, r is equal to d over t. And that's the answer. For the next one, if I'm solving for n, I'm going to ask the question again, what kind of operations do I have? I actually have both, multiplication and addition. And this m is the confusing one because actually this m is actually my addition. So the inverse of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to minus m to both sides. And then you have to make sure you write it like this, 5 minus m. Because you're taking m away from 5, so it has to be written like that. That cancels, and then I have negative n equals 5 minus m. Now I'm going to erase this part so we can see what we have left. Notice that it's a subtraction sign here, but since I'm getting rid of the m, it becomes a negative. It's a negative or a subtraction. They're both the same. So I have a negative n, which I cannot have. I'm not done with my problem because I have to have n by itself. So I'm actually going to take that negative n and rewrite it because it doesn't look very nice. And understand that in front of that n is actually a 1. So I'm actually going to divide out my negative 1 and divide out my negative 1 to this side. In doing that, I have the answer. N is equal to 5 minus m divided by negative 1. Now I want to just clarify one thing, because if you're doing your homework and you write this answer a different way, you're going to get it wrong. So I want you to pay attention that it is not okay to write your answer like this. Because if you do that, your order of operations will divide this first, get an answer, and then it will take 5 minus this answer. It is not okay to write it out with a division slash bar like that. You're going to need to write it this way, with a bar straight across. Now there is one way you could write it with a slash, and that is if you do 5 minus m, division sign with a slash, and then parentheses around this, negative m. That means you're going to do this first, the 5 minus m divided by negative 1. Okay, next problem. This is completely multiplication. L times W times H is equal to V. Length times width times height. So the inverse of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide out the L and the H. You can do it all at the same time. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So these are going to cancel, and I get W equals V over LH. Now I don't need parentheses around that unless I were to write it like this. V divided by parentheses LH. If I don't have parentheses and I write it like this, it will divide this first and then multiply by H. That is not what we want as our answer. So that is not the right way to do it. And I recommend you use a bar straight across. Next problem. This one is an addition sign and a subtraction sign, and we're solving for r. So I'm going to get rid of my s by minusing s to both sides, and I'm also going to minus t, inverse of addition, at the same time. So I'm going to minus s and I'm going to minus t at the same time. I cross all that out, and now I have a negative r equals z minus s minus t. I'm not done because that's a negative r right there. I can't have a negative as my solution. I know that 1 goes in front of the r, so I can divide by negative 1. And then my answer is therefore, canceling out my negative 1's, r equals z minus s minus t over negative 1. Again, you have to write it like this, or you can put it in parentheses. Okay, the next set. So these problems are a little tricky, and I'm going to try to move that over to here. If you look, you're trying to get s by itself, so I'm going to get rid of the whole 3x, everything, both of them, both the 3 and the x. It's a term I'm going to get rid of. So if I'm going to get rid of the whole term, I'm going to add opposite. So I minus 3x to both sides. These are going to cancel, and I get st is equal to 6 minus 3x. And then I'm going to get s by itself. It's a multiplication problem. The inverse of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide by t. And then it's canceled. When I cancel it, my answer is s equals 6 minus 3x over t. Number 2, I'm going to get x by itself. This is my multiplication part right here, and this is my add problem right here, my add part. So I need to add opposite first. So the opposite of plus b is minus b, and minus b to both sides. Again, I got to take my y minus b, y minus b. It cannot be written like this, b minus y. That is not okay. They are not the same problem. Subtraction is not commutative. Y minus b is equal to, these cancel, and then I get mx, and I'm solving for x, so I'm going to divide out my m. It's multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. So when I divide out my m, I get x by itself, and I have my answer. Next, I'm going to solve for b. A to A right here is my addition. I'm going to get rid of the whole term, so I'm going to add opposite, minus 2a to both sides. Then I have 2b is equal to c minus 2a. If you notice, this one was an addition problem right here, so I don't have a negative right here. There's no negative. I could put an add right here if I wanted to, but I don't need to. And then I'm solving for b, so I'm going to divide by 2. Option b equals c minus 2a in parentheses divided by 2. Okay, last problem. I'm getting y by itself here. This is my term I'm getting rid of, so I'm going to add the whole thing. Add opposite. These are going to cancel, and I get 7y equals 2 minus 3x. In the end, I'm going to divide by 7. Divide by 7, getting y by itself. It's a multiplication problem. The inverse of multiplication is division, so I divide by 7. Cancel, y equals 2 minus 3x over 7. And that's my solution. Good luck with your homework.